Hello, oodles and noodles. We are back yet another time for another review, another perusal of my book collection, which is slowly growing. I used to have so many more books, and it's nice to see the collection slowly growing on this bookshelf. It'd be nicer if I can get the other half of my bookshelves so I can actually keep collecting more, but we'll see how things go with the wood shortages and problems for delivery because of COVID screwing around with the entire ecosystem of bookshelves, which is very unfortunate. I mentioned in my last video that I was finishing up David Dalglish's first book in the Keepers trilogy called Soulkeeper. This hefty, beautiful bastard is quite a doozy, and I wanted to meander my way through how I really enjoyed this novel and simultaneously was turned off quite a bit by some of its, what I consider to be flaws, because I enjoyed it so much. So the flaws stood out so immensely. Although, to be fair, before we ever start, most of the flaws that I'm going to mention are really much more of a probably stylistic choice more than anything. So it's a preference, not a actual pooping on the book itself. So Soulkeeper begins with us following a man by the name of Devin, and he is a soul keeper. So he is part of the Keeping Church. He's for all intents and purposes, someone who goes around fighting off bandits, criminals, helping really anywhere that he's asked to go. He's also sort of a apothecary, healer who helps where he can with his abilities, and simultaneously, in his most important skill set, is helping people deal with what's called in this story the reaping hour. So one of the most interesting concepts of the Keepers trilogy is that when souls pass on, they literally pass on. People see this. So there is what is called the reaping hour that happens, it seems to be every night. It's a little bit unclear. And during this reaping hour, if a prayer is given over the body of a corpse, then the soul literally ascends up into the heavens to live with the three sisters, who are the goddesses within this world. Super fascinating, really interesting concept. Now, the twist in this is that in this world, besides seeing souls and knowing that they exist, there's nothing else. There's no magic, there's no nothing as far as we can understand. And the interesting part of this story is that for reasons we don't understand at the beginning, and although, and this is answered to pretty much a full degree by the end of the story, magic is coming back. And alongside of it are fairy creatures, monsters, or at least monsters to humans. And that is the philosophical crux of the whole story. As we follow Devin, one of these soul keepers who, generally speaking, has been part of this church, which has denied the existence of these things for many centuries and now has to deal with their return. You also follow his sister, Adria, who is a mind keeper, another part of the church that deals more with healing, scholarship, that kind of stuff, and his brother-in-law, who is a wise man. He basically is someone who deals with knowledge and learning more and more about the world. And they all end up with unique abilities and skill sets to deal with this coming world. Are they given by the goddesses? We don't know. They just happen to have them. And there's many other things that happen. And that is probably my biggest problem with this story, is that there's too much. Now, this is a 650-page book, so it is kind of hefty. It does have a lot of time to build a lot of these concepts into the story. And a lot of the main issues, the ideas, the knowledge that we're slowly learning and accumulating as we go along, because it's a larger book, it doesn't feel too squished in. But there is too much happening to our main character, Devin. We do flit around and see Adria, his sister, and her side of things, but overall, there's just too much. Every time Devin walks somewhere, something happens. He walks into some magical creature, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and they all happen to help him or try to kill him. There's always something happening. Now, in some ways, that's great. It's action-packed, it's intense. You're constantly learning. You're finding out about Devin's backstory as the story goes along. You're finding out more about his sister, Adria. You're finding out about the goddesses. You're finding out who these fey creatures are, where they come from, why did they disappear, and why are they suddenly back. You're finding out more about magic, and it's really great. It's exciting, and the world itself has very much a Neil Gaiman touch to it. It's very much like Neverwhere, where it's just mysterious and dark, and that's kind of the crux, the philosophical crux of the story is, how do humans handle magic coming back? But not only magic, but creatures who seem to be made of magic, who can use magic, and who quite frankly tend to be always stronger than humans, and they kind of look down on humans. And this ties into the overall story, which I don't want to ruin, but that's really the big crux of it is, are humans better than the monsters that they fear? Are the monsters better? Who's in the right? Who's in the wrong? Can they coexist? Did they used to coexist? How? Why are all these things happening? And it's a really fascinating story. The lore behind it, what David Dalglish has managed to shove into this book, and the fact that it's only the first is really amazing, because if he squished this much into the first book, I can just imagine how much more is going to be expounded upon in book 2 and in book 3. But again, it's a little bit too quick. There's just too much happening. There's a lot of bad things that happen to our main character, Devin, but at the same time, again, he's always happening to meet this person, meet that person, meet this creature who happens to help him to do this, to do that, which makes it just a little bit too convenient. He just always happens to be in the right place, the right time, meeting the right people, meeting the right things that give him the right stuff. And it's too much. It's just an overwhelming sense of like a deluge of information and things happening to our characters. It's not too realistic in a certain sense. Now, granted, this is a fantasy book. Do we care about realism? I don't know. I just feel that I was bombarded by stuff, and many of the times, because there was so much happening, the characters, in a certain sense, gave a level of realism to their reactions to the newness of the world. There was a lot of despair. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of, suffering. There was a lot of just being overwhelmed by all the new things being brought into their world. But simultaneously, they just kind of handled it in a way that I don't feel would be realistic in a world where for centuries it was only humans, and all of a sudden there's all of this. And even though quite a bit of time is passing in the world, still within a very, very short, abbreviated time period, everybody's kind of just handling all this stuff like it's nothing. And yeah, every single person, every single other side character happens to have something that helps them with whatever it is they're doing. Again, maybe it's because the book does not give answers as to why the people who get their powers all happen to be interconnected to our main character. Maybe that is something that will be answered in the later books and make a little bit more sense to me. But at this time, really, my biggest issue with this is just too much happening, too much convenience, too much inconvenience also, just every bad thing, good thing happening, all centralized around this family for what seems like no apparent reason whatsoever. And with all the other information that we're kind of spoon-fed constantly, it seems a little bit weird that it's not explained why these three people are singled out and why they all happen to know each other. That's kind of the crux of it. So again, I still really, really enjoyed this novel. The characters are all very interesting. They are realistic, the struggles that they deal with. They have some really, really great scenes together, whether it's between themselves, alone in their own thoughts, or when dealing with the new other side characters that they meet along the way. there's quite a fascinating environment and world being built around, even though almost all of the story is happening within one city, Longheim, which is basically David's version of, I guess, London in this world. You still manage to get this breadth of mystery, of discovery as you go along. The action is really, really great. There's some phenomenal fight scenes, some phenomenal just battles that go along. The monsters and creatures are really, really interesting. And just again, that kind of philosophical discussion kind of threading its way through the whole book, which is whether humans are worthy of being where they're at and whether these creatures are really monsters and how that's going to intermingle are really, really great, as along with the storylines of just the goddesses and all their creatures and the other things that they developed. And so it has tons of potential. I really see this as a series that could become something great. I'm hoping it kind of slows its pacing a little bit in book 2 so that there's not just this constant barrage of information. But I think even if that maintains, I don't consider it to be this like horrible flaw. It's just, I guess, it kind of seems like David just had so many ideas and he tried to shove every single one inside of this book, which in and of itself is it's not bad. It's kind of it's an exciting story. It makes you want to discover new things. There's just, that's what it's supposed to be, right? There was no magic, now there is. There was no other creatures but humans, now there is. And what is this new world going to be like that they need to figure out and discover? And so it's an adventure story, it's a magic story, it's just a fun time. It's a very, very fun time. And I would definitely recommend checking it out. I am going to be reading book 2 in not long, so I definitely recommend you all finish this book so you'll be ready for my next review. Let me know what you think down below if you have read this novel. Did you enjoy the action as much as I did? Do you find the fairy tale creatures to be fascinating, or were they a little bit too much at certain points? What do you think about the goddesses? Let me know down below. Check out the website geektails.ca. I will be back with hopefully another review next week. I'm going to try to finish off book 4 of the Superpowered series finally. I kind of put a delay on that after book 3. So I'll take care of that, and I will see you all soon. Farewell.